The gods of Faerun are powerful. We can't get around to that fact. Even those of demigod status are several orders of magnitude more powerful than anything we as mortals could hope to achieve, though I suspect elven high magic could come close. There are gods who can whip up sudden storms and obliterate entire towns in their wrath. Others can manifest as avatars and destroy liches with the same ease as we could kill a carrion crawler. Still others can cut off the magic from any of their worshippers if they pick up a forbidden weapon. They can provide their clerics with knowledge and proficiency of their favoured weapons even across vast planes of existence. They know always when their name is spoken in secret or anti-magic field, and speaking of anti-magic field, most of them don't work on gods. Their power is so beyond us that the last mortal who tried to become one by force couldn't even handle the first aspect of their portfolio without his city dropping out of the sky. And yet, beyond them, there is another power. And because that one has had a hand in shaping which gods are present today, everyone should know as much as they can about him. Today we're going to talk about what little we know of the higher power that the gods must listen to. The Hidden One, whose presence was made known to us mortals over 100 years ago, whose proclamation was made for us to witness, but whose far-reaching effects were for those that we worship. Since that point he has not made further contact with us nor with the clergy that once attracted thousands to his name. We do not know much of who he is, and he is defined not by his presence, but by the events that he precipitated. From the beginning of our world, and to the probable end. Today we're going to talk about Lord Ao. Now, first things first, a lot of information might seem weird to the casual observer in the sense that we actually have the information. But to all of you that suggest that I'm drawing on unknown information or information I shouldn't have, well, first of all, that's ridiculous because I obviously must have. But also, I possess a wealth of powers and privileges afforded to me beyond the obvious that allow me to gain knowledge from a variety of sources. In the time that Ao has appeared, he has taken the guise of a male-presenting humanoid, 12 feet tall. His features are average, appearing neither young nor old, neither handsome nor ugly, just unremarkable and symmetrical. He sported a white beard and had white hair and wore a robe that the texts say was of celestial cloth, showing stars and moons moving in what was likely only a logical pattern to him. A modern day example would likely be the robe of stars, whose material shows a starry night sky. For scale, however, considering who he is, perhaps he can see the pinwheel of the cosmological planes, the crystalline spheres of other spell-jammable worlds in his celestial cloth. I'll move on, consider this the artistic license of a mage who really likes textiles. It's noted that the appearance of the god's avatars and other manifestations take on a narrative of what that god's about. Joaquin, for example, wears a cape of coins. Azuth, being a god primarily of wizards, sometimes appears merely as a floating bearded mouth. We are known for our beards and for the words of power stored just behind them, after all. Ao appearing as the everyman would imply that while he seems to manifest more often and dictate only for the gods, he's here for us, for the running of the world, and for us. More on this later, but considering his decree that gods would gain their powers by the quality and quantity of worship from then on, it would seem that he was against the complacency of the gods in old times, and sought to give us mortals value moving ahead. Now, I'm not saying we're more important than gods, because we're not, individually. But together, united in faith, we become a stronger voice in the face of the world. Is it any wonder then that after the time of troubles, people started to worship Ao? In Waterdeep, you can still find the original temple that the nobility and guilds paid for, the Temple of the Overgod. People who had heard the decree flocked to it, and for the nobles of the city it was the latest diversion, the place to be seen attending. But in less than a year the clergy had all but disbanded. The visitors few and far between because Lord Ao never answered a single prayer, never made himself known. Cults devoted to Ao are accepted in Faerun because the gods don't fear them, and questions posed to the gods regarding the cults are answered with a sort of benign patience, advising the clergy not to worry because Ao will never actually answer them. He had withdrawn from the world. It's odd, in a world where the services of a god have the expectation of worship, why didn't he reply? And did he actually do all this for us? If so, why didn't he respond to further requests? I think because the individual doesn't matter to him. What matters is the pattern and system, and that's defined by the whole population. I think that Ao is a truly neutral power, beyond even the definition bias of those who worship him. I think that's an alien and terrifying concept to anyone, mortal or deity, on Faerun. Anyway, if you're ever invited to the Senosha building in Waterdeep, pay close attention to the architecture. It was made for a power that empowered us but stayed silent ever since. So not much is known of Ao himself because he doesn't talk to us, and he's only been seen a few times. He withdraws from the world except in times of cataclysm, so instead of defining him by how he manifests before us, let's try to define him by what he has done. Below is a brief history of time, defined by the actions of the Overgod. These are taken from many sources, some of them old and crumbling, others from the living memories of immortal beings. I think at least one of them came from a missive from Elminster himself, whom I hope will one day be kind enough to accept an interview with the Conclave. Bit of a fanboy moment there, sorry. In the very beginning, before Abir Toril, before anything really, it is said that Ao created realm space. And because creation myths have bias inherent to them, we already have a conflicting point. One source says that Ao created all that we know to exist, not only the material realm space but also the other planets, the sun, the astral sea. Another states that he merely, and it's a big merely, he merely created the crystal sphere that surrounds realm space, and brought the deities Selûne and Sha'ir into being, who in turn created everything else within and without. Putting aside the fact that no one alive can create a deity, we can only request they be elevated, and even then that's iffy at best. Let's look at what we know of the crystal sphere that encircles the solar system of Toril. It has a radius of 5,100,000,000 kilometers and is made of an unbreakable material, traversable only by magic. If we assume that it is made of diamond, one of the hardest crystals we know of, at a mere thickness of a cubic centimeter, then the weight in pounds of that sphere is 5.7664827 times 10 to the power of 15. By comparison, the 5th Age's creation spell can create a 5x5x5 foot cube of diamond that lasts for 10 minutes. That weighs 124 pounds, incidentally. This Overgod can create a so far eternal crystal sphere that weighs the total weight of Toril, plus another 5,766,482,700,000,000 such Torils. During the Days of Thunder, at the earliest days of recorded history, when an amphibious race known as the Batrachi were in a war against the Titans of legend and losing, several primordials of tremendous power were released. The gods of that time immediately intervened in a war of opposition. The primordials responded with horrifying tactics, including slamming a moon into the planet, which rearranged whole continents and supposedly created a sea of fallen stars. That event is known as the Tearfall. But before the world was destroyed entirely, Ao stepped in and split the world into two spheres. One, Abir, which could be controlled by the primordials, and one, Toril, that was for the gods. At that moment, and it was only a moment, he also created the Tablets of Fate, said to control the balance between chaos and law, and be the physical manifestation of the barrier between the divided worlds. What balance between chaos and law actually means is at best a guess. The power and philosophies of intent are far beyond anything I could comprehend, which is why I'm going to try. I wouldn't be a wizard otherwise. In almost anything there is the potential for decay. Knock a house of cards and it'll almost certainly fall over, but knock a deck of cards and the house doesn't have an equal chance of being built. In decay lies chaos, a breakdown of rules, but when decay ends there is infinite law, as nothing further can break down. Beyond that, we have aspects of Mechanus and other lawful creatures and powers that would try to maintain order indefinite, and that means no change, no individuality, no free will. To me there are times for law to win, and other times we sorely need chaos, and I think that the Tablets of Fate help maintain that need. Head forward tens of thousands of years, during the Imiskari Empire, many peoples were taken captive from a distant multiversal world where the local magic was not sufficiently advanced to protect against such predations. It was Ao who requested a power named Ptah to take a message to the original gods of those worlds, who gave them permission to set up bases of worship and power within the Faerunian pantheons to help free their people enslaved upon Toril. It was by Ao's will that we had the Mulharandi and Untheric pantheons. And then he fell off the blind sense, until the Year of Shadows, 1358 DR, when Bane and Merkel stole the Tablets of Fate in the misguided idea that if Ao created and maintained this artifact, some of his power must be trapped within and able to be utilized. It is said that when Ao discovered them missing, he brought all the gods into a room and asked that they be returned immediately. When no one stepped forward, he cast all of the powers out of the outer realms and onto Toril as mortal avatars, greatly diminished and stripped of their portfolio powers, save for Helm the Guardian. It is written that when Tyr, our god of justice, protested this, saying that the actions of Ao were not just, Ao tore out Tyr's eyes. Justice is blind because of Ao. When Helm queried the decision but was steadfast in his duty to prevent any god from ascending again from the material plane, Ao is said to have explained that he was displeased with the gods treating the world as if it was for their own amusement, rather than the purpose for which they were created, and that the theft was just the precipitation point, the last straw. Even Mystra, embodiment of the weave itself, was prevented from using her gifts to their fullest extents. Think on that. Ao maintained the weave itself as it was the embodiment of Mystra, but bound Mystra to an avatar form that was itself forbidden and barred from using the benefits of the weave from which she was made. If that doesn't make you scratch your head, then I need to work harder. This isn't the time to go into detail about the Time of Troubles, though I'm happy to go through the history of it if people are interested, but in the end, Ao's tablets were returned not by the gods, but by determined mortals. These mortals were elevated to godhood, I assume because they understood the lesson Ao had been trying to teach, even better than the gods who had continued to fight amongst themselves in their avatar forms. Ao made the pronouncement of how gods were defined by worship from now on, and broke the Tablets of Fate into powder to show them all how useless they were ultimately as a way to gain some sort of power over Ao. Interestingly, however, this also broke the balance of law and chaos, and unraveled the causal and planar rules of realm space itself. Plus side, it made spelljamming much easier. Downside, it made planar invasions much easier. During the Spell Plague, Ao didn't make an appearance, and most scholars have since decided that because the Cataclysm was in part made of the Far Realm, a place of defilement and nightmare outside of Ao's control, it was thus beyond Ao's power to stop. Personally, I have a different theory, and it's that people need to stop thinking of Ao as an entity of goals and motivations that can be quantifiable by mortal ethics. The gods have ethics because they control aspects of life that are experienced by us. They are powers that are in part determined by us. And mortal ethics, rules, and madnesses are part of that experience. But Ao is above that, and I believe that he could see the end result. I think that, like Mystara before him, he wanted to see this play through. Sha'ir and Syrinx started this, and they gambled and lost, and then the rest of us lost, and we all needed to learn things that we could never have learned without the spell plague, including, and it's a massive possibly here, including Ao himself, because he destroyed the tablets. Because that's what he is, a teacher and personification of the big picture. I'm talking from historical privilege here, but we did okay in the Fourth Age. We survived, we're here now able to talk about it in an abstract sense. And every other time, Ao has stepped in when things just couldn't continue on the path they were going, not without destroying everything. Which brings us finally to the Second Sundering. During the Spell Plague, the realm space enchantment that had divided the planets of Abir and Toril ended, and the worlds became one once more. Ao decided that he would recreate the Tablets of Fate, and once again would split the planets into two. In full transparency, he warned the gods of this ahead of time, who immediately and in time-honoured fashion started waging wars against each other, Creator chosen to consolidate and magnify their power, and generally just tried to elevate themselves and their pantheons to be as powerful as possible before their positions were etched into the new Tablets of Fate. Gods died or were banished, Mystra came back and prevented the weave from being subsumed by sha'ir into a total shadow weave. Flying cities crashed into Mythdraenor, and still the Mythal persisted thanks to precision elven arcaneering. The Netherese came back, dead gods came back, and when the two planets were split, much of the geographical changes wrought by the Spell Plague were reverted, including the Seed of Fallen Stars being refilled by a magical rain. Cosmologically, nothing had really changed, but the rules of realm space had reverted, leaving behind only a historical record that the Spell Plague had ever occurred, and some of the more cool features, such as Earth motes, stayed behind. Ao is now the sole authority on who can become a god, and vast expensive rituals that require sacrifice of self or the favour of a deity cannot elevate a being to demigod status. All that power is designed to merely be powerful enough to get Ao's attention so that he can say yes or no. Ao also theoretically has the power to demote any of the gods at will. His is a power and ability stronger than any god and all gods combined. It is unknown if he himself answers to anyone higher, but I personally hope not. Like his name Ao, he is the Alpha and Omega of powers. Thank you for listening to this discussion on Ao, and if you have any questions, you're welcome to leave them below. I always answer a comment and appreciate the feedback. Be sure to like and subscribe because that will help with future endeavours, and remember that there is a test coming nearer to the end of the calendar year. Coming up next time is our crafty discussion of a new world, and next week we'll be looking at the evolution of cleric magic over time and what that might mean for the future. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, study hard, and to be continued.